Hey there, welcome to another Kinstretch class. Today's class is a little bit different. First of all, because I'm flying solo, I'm just going to run this one by myself. No model except for me, and that's partly because I want to bring you into some positions and some work that I do for my shoulders, kind of bring you into a training session of mine. So these are positions that I've sort of found and fine-tuned to be really effective for my shoulder joints. I hope they are for you too. But just one note, which is that my shoulders are pretty happy, pretty healthy, I'm really glad to say, which means this is going to be a little bit more of an intermediate class. Some of these positions should be great to try out if your shoulders are feeling good, but if your shoulders are dealing with any issues or pinches or you know that something's going on, probably another class might be a little bit better entryway into capsular training and connective tissue training, which is really the focus here. In terms of props, you won't need much other than some comfortable floor space and then maybe a yoga block or a pillow. I'll use a yoga block. Let's just dive right in. So we will get to the shoulders, of course, but the point I want to make here at first is we're going to focus our warm-up on the neighboring joints, which is just generally a really good idea whenever you're working through a class or a workout. What other joints could I get moving through their full range of motion? So we're going to start out here on hands and knees, maybe a collapsed version of that. So either walking your hands back a little bit or sitting all the way down butt to heels. And then from this position, extend your spine fully. So belly button to knees, tail feathers up. And then you're going to try to keep the part of your spine that's below your rib cage totally still. Now, those hands staying strong on the floor, begin to round your upper back, trying to round into as much flexion as you can through the ribs without losing that lower back positioning. Okay? Maybe take a breath in and out here to really maximize and accentuate that flexion. And then starting from your belly button, reach your belly button even more forward and work your way back up your spine, trying to feel the specific motion of extension through your upper back. Once that's there, focus on the very top of your spine, but below your neck, and begin rounding into flexion. Pausing just when you feel like you get to the bottom of your rib cage. So don't worry too much about doing this perfectly. Focus your efforts and energy instead on trying to just get your thoracic spine to move. It's a very stiff part of the body because it's protecting some very valuable spinal cord real estate. So we're glad that it's stiff, but we do want to make sure we get the motion out of it that is available, even if that's just a few degrees. Final rep into extension, finishing up. And relax. Great. Okay. Then let's also focus on those scapula moving. And I'm going to do this from just from an upright position. And I'm going to do one arm at a time. So go ahead and reach your arm straight down by your side. If you know that you do better with scapular cars, arm out in front, you could do that as well. But whatever your choice is, find that nice, strong, active arm. Other hand, bring it to your ribs to monitor flare of your rib cage because we don't want any motion there. And then start feeling into that circular motion of your shoulder blade moving forward, up, back, and down. Just starting with the idea of motion, like the directions of motion. But as soon as you connect those dots and you start to feel the circle, try to lock in instead on the sensation of that motion. So what muscles pull your shoulder blade forward? What muscles pull your shoulder blade up? The hard one, what muscles pull your shoulder blade back and then down? And then what muscles keep your elbows straight through all of this? Hint, there's some muscles in the back of your arm, okay? Now let's switch directions wherever you're at and do a few circles there. Going by feel, Always an option to go back and forth over a certain range of motion that feels sticky or that could go for a little bit more sensation. All right, and wrap that side up, shake it out. Same thing on the other side. Make a nice tight fist. Free hand monitors your ribs, and then slide that shoulder forward, up, back, and down. I'm just going to switch for your view so that you can see that my arm, my shoulder goes forward, up and back and down and all that, but my arm, I'm trying to keep it right in line with my torso the best I can, just to try to limit the variables a little bit. So that fist will move up and down, but trying your best to not let it move forward and back can really help you focus and notice what's going on in the actual shoulder blade. Go ahead, switch directions. Last one, make sure you're maximizing your range here. Going slow. And then let it go. All right. Now let's warm up those shoulders a little bit, and I want you to do this from your back, laying on your back, and we're going to just focus on the rotation of the shoulders. Really big focus of class today. So lay down in a comfortable back lying position. Set those elbows out to the side. They could be closer to your torso, but ideally straight out from your armpits. And then keep those shoulder blades pancaked to the ground as we start to explore some rotation. So we're going to do both sides at the same time, but let's start with that right arm rotating back as far as you can. If you can get to the floor, pin your wrist to the floor. If you're not quite at the floor, just feel active effort like you're trying to get further. And then keeping that, start to externally rotate the other arm, knowing that those shoulders might be different. Then I'm keeping my left wrist pinned to the floor as I internally rotate my right shoulder. Find that end range, muscly, strong, so someone couldn't pull me out of this position. And then same idea on the left side. And trying to feel deep into those shoulder joints so that you get the twist from that shoulder and not from your scapula coming up off the ground. So try your best. Use that scapular awareness we just built with your car to keep your shoulder blade pancaked flat on the ground. Couple more here. Again, the goal here is to prime your brain and prime your shoulders for some range of motion work, some stretching. And let that go. All right. Now we're going to get into the first position, the stretching position. And the goal here is to increase the range of motion or increase the space of your shoulder joint. So we increase that space always with rotation. And you might be familiar with sort of our sleeper stretches for internal rotation, either against the wall or on the ground. And those are great. I love those. But when we do these instead from quadruped, we have an opportunity to actually use gravity and use the floor to drive the arm bone into the back of the shoulder joint and find some different lines of tension, which can be very useful, have been very useful for me. One note, we're going to be holding this stretch for 2 minutes, which is really the time required to make range of motion changes. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the class. But for now, grab your yoga block or whatever you're going to use to support your head and get into that quadruped position. And at first, before we rotate the arm, I want you to just feel into how if you move your torso in relation to that arm, your shoulder gets pushed into a stretch of the back of the shoulder tissues. So you kind of got to reach your chest towards that hand. You might keep both hands on the ground or feel what it feels like to only prop on one arm. It can be kind of intense.
But what I'm not doing is shrugging my shoulder up to my neck. Okay, so I'm just getting that feel. That's the same feel we're going to want, but now with the elbow on the ground and with the fist right out in front of you. You can notice here, this is how we're going to wind up rotation, but before we do, bring your chest, again, towards the floor, finding that feeling of the arm driving into the back of the joint, and then from here, wind up further internal rotation with your free hand twisting you back into rotation, just wherever you feel set. The last variable is going to be turning your head away, which can open up even more stretch from the shoulder to the neck. I'm going to just change my position slightly so you can see. Slightly different angle. Dropping my chest, internally rotating, and then camping out here. I'm changing my position, but you should be staying still now that you've found your stretch. And we're going to start our clock here for 2 minutes of stretching. Breathing, letting your body relax into this position. And as always, when we're working on range of motion, if you feel your body let go a little bit, feel free to work deeper into that range. Just be gentle as you do so, so no sudden motions, no big amount of motion, and also never stretching in a way that feels like you're fighting with yourself. It should feel instead like you're easing that joint or that tissue into a little bit more range. That's always how I think of it, is easing into it, not forcing. I spent years and years forcing my joints into stretches, and I can tell you from experience it really doesn't work. Sometimes it even causes injury. Just another minute or so, breathing before we do our isometrics. And keep in mind your body won't be completely relaxed here, but the goal is that the tissue we're focusing on is able to relax. So keep circling back to that area with your mind's eye, trying to feel into, can you ask that tissue to let go any further? Alright, coming up on the end of our 2-minute hold. Take one more breath and then brace your midsection. And then very lightly for this first tester pails rep, just try to feel the tissue turn on when you ask your shoulder to unwind from this position, but keep your hand blocking it. All right? So you're just testing out that pails effort, and then relax it back down again. Okay. Now on this next one, we're going to intensify. We're going to do 3 pails rail sets right back to back. So brace. Begin externally rotating that shoulder, or trying to, but not letting the arm move at all. And locate a nice, strong pails contraction. Something significant that feels like it's going to tire you out in the next 10 or 15 seconds. And now switch to rails, trying to pull your shoulder into more internal rotation, trying to reach your wrist closer to your knees. Keep your brace, switch back to pails. Try to unwind the arm, find even more contraction deep in that joint. And then rails. Pull yourself deeper. Now our final pails, switch over to pails. Trying to really drive your wrist against your hand. And rails, trying to reach your wrist away from your hand, but knowing that probably nothing will move. But just trying to locate what muscles contract to help you do that. 3, 2, 1. Now stay in position as you relax. Drop your chest further and see if you can locate that stretch again, knowing it might be a little deeper now. Alright, and then we're going to come out of that position.
And before we go over to the other side, just reach that right arm right out to the side and give your body a little input of some capsule rotation, trying to take up any of that new positioning and send it to the brain. So the brain's really on board with what's going on here. Good. All right, and let that go. Nice work. Now coming around for our other side, I just did my right arm, now I'm going to do my left arm. For this side again, it's going to be different. Both sides are really going to be different. So I recommend you start out with quadruped, straight arm, and just feel into that motion I'm talking about of driving your arm back to the back of the shoulder joint. And, it really helps you start to notice and feel that there are just so many ways and variations you can use to locate the stretch that your body is asking for. So we're really looking for that line of tension that might show up when you drive that arm to the back of the shoulder joint. After you get a feel for that, come down to your elbow again. And here, you'll internally rotate that arm, but as you do, make sure you're driving your chest towards your forearm so that you take advantage of that arm in back of shoulder stretch, that possibility there. Okay, now I'm going to again do this from this side so that when I turn I can actually look at you and talk a little bit about why we might want to hold 2-minute stretch. So find that chest drop, add rotation to it, wind yourself up, maybe using the arm, or if you can get there, the knee can be a nice easy way to do that, but I'm going to stay with my arm. And then once you think you're close, rest your head so that you can really let the neck muscles relax and you can fine-tune that stretch right where your body runs out of range of motion. Micro-adjusting, smaller and smaller motions as you zero in, and then just camping out once you find it. A little less antisocial to stretch this way. Okay. Now, when we use this 2-minute rule to describe why you might want to hold a stretch for that long, again, this is really only if you're looking to expand your range of motion. There's a purpose for passive stretching, even if you don't want to expand that range, just in the sense that you want to let your nervous system relax into whatever setup you're stretching into. But for 2 minutes, or even longer than 2 minutes, the reason behind that is because there's been research done on how long it takes your connective tissue to actually let go and start to yield a little bit. And that research indicates it takes about 2 to 3 minutes, depending on what tissue. So if we know that, and that's been shown on an experimental research on actual living human tissue, and we then apply it to our own bodies, we'll be able to move into ranges of motion that might not be available unless we spend 2 to 3 minutes there. So this is why, when people talk about wanting to get more flexible or more range of motion, you can really just know if they're being serious or not based on, are they stretching for 2 or 3 minutes? Because if they're not, then we know the connective tissue has not fully let go, hasn't really yielded, and so you might be training at your end range. That's great stuff, of course, but it most likely is not going to be the best way to get into more or deeper ranges of motion. Okay, so that took us almost to 2 minutes. I'm glancing at my watch here. Let's just get one more second here, some nice deep breaths. Feeling if you're holding on to any tension that you weren't aware of. Okay. And then do your tester pails rep. This is really just to make sure that when we ramp up to a high intensity, your body is ready for it, feels safe. So gradually try to unwind your arm from this position, feeling that nothing is able to move because you're blocking that hand. Just to 30% or so, feeling into what turns on when you try to unwind the arm, and then ramping it back down into a stretch, maybe taking that stretch a little deeper if it's available. All right, now we're going to do 3 quite intense sets of pails rails, one after another, without relaxing in between. So take a breath, brace your body,
And then when you're ready, begin ramping up that pales contraction, trying to unwind the arm, getting up to a nice, solid, intense effort that feels challenging but still safe. Hold that. Good. Keep it consistent, keep your body braced, and now switch to trying to increase the internal rotation. So switch to a rails contraction. Not letting anything move, not letting your shoulders shrug, but just trying to locate those deep rotators in your shoulder. Now back to a pales contraction, trying to unwind the arm. And a rails contraction. Finally, your last pales contraction, trying to drive any more intensity that you can so that by the end of this set, you're actually tired in these tissues, and rails. And slowly let that rails go. Staying in position long enough to find a stretch again. Make sure your brain knows this is a safe position to be in, even though that was a tough set. And then make your way upright, nice and slow. Reach the arm out to the side. Ooh, I made an impact. I can feel it deep in that joint. And then nice, easy capsular rotation of the shoulder. Nice and easy for now. Plenty more to do. All right, cool. So shake that out. Now that we've increased the range of motion by stretching and isometrically working from there, now we're going to want to just condition that new range a little bit. So for this, I'm going to have you come into a sideline position. I'm going to lay sort of head onto the camera so you can see, because we're going to be training this range of motion behind you from extension all the way to this sort of T position. But we're going to take advantage of gravity pushing down in that sideline position. Okay, so you'll lay down on your side. We're going to be working this top arm. So once you're here, start with your hand right by your side. Internally rotate the shoulder as much as you can. Drive that shoulder back and just hold there for a moment, trying to accumulate more contraction in the back of the shoulder, the back of the armpit, really lighting up that tissue. And then once you got a good lock on it, keep it working as you externally rotate the shoulder as much as you can, and use that to begin rolling the arm until you're basically reaching vertically to the sky, but straight out to the side from your shoulder. And then pause there, internally rotate, and keep adding internal rotation as you slowly scan back behind you. Okay, we're not going to go all the way to the pocket. We're going to stay in extension, externally rotate, use that as a rolling mechanism. Trying to find more contraction in the back of the shoulder, internally rotate. Good, couple more. Trying to find more contraction. And whatever contraction you can find, trying to fatigue those tissues. All right, let that go. Switch over to your other side. So I'm going to start with my arm right by my side, fully internally rotate, reach that arm straight back, just hold there for a moment. Trying to accumulate and gather more contraction of the back of your shoulder stuff, back of your armpit, back of your arm. Once you're there, start externally rotating, using that roll and rotation to reach into those space behind your body. Get to a place where your chest is really opening up, and then internally rotate to come back, trying to wind up as much internal rotation as you can. This is a zone of our range of motion that doesn't get a lot of work, doesn't get a lot of feature in our daily lives, But the tissues that are responsible for this position, that we can train in this position, are super important for happy shoulders. That's why we want to spend some time here. Couple more. Again, your goal should be to feel tissue first. And if you're feeling the tissue, to fatigue that tissue. So we're not just moving, but we're actually trying to drive intensity into that focused tissue. All right, and let that go.
All right. So then we're going to move back to training some rotation here and introduce this idea of self-resisting. So again, if you wanted to grab your pillow or your yoga block, you could use that. And I'm going to lay down, focus on my left arm here to start. No, we're going to do both sides, so either one is fine. And we're going to set up on the sideline position again, kind of like what you would use for a sleeper stretch. And that's sort of what inspires this. But instead of holding a stretch and working isometrics, we've already done that. So instead, we're going to be working on resisting ourselves through this rotational path. So once you get set up, making sure your shoulder is not going to shrug up to your ear, and taking a second to get into a comfortable shape, start internally and externally rotating the shoulder. So you're really finding that twist. And I like to use the other hand, especially if this is new, to just monitor that motion is only happening in the arm and it isn't accidentally happening by motion of the socket of your shoulder. You want the socket to stay still and just have the ball, part of that ball and socket, be rotating. Okay? So the other hand is free here to do that. All right. Let's settle into your end range of internal rotation. Feel some active effort there, and then help yourself find even more active effort by bringing your top or supporting arm to the bottom of your wrist. Now, as I start to press with that arm, my working arm, my bottom arm, is going to push back, and I'm going to feel some tissue really come online. That's what we're after. Keep that tissue working as your support arm starts to win, and force your arm back into external rotation. Go slowly so that you can keep that pressure against your supporting arm, and you can also feel when you run out of safe range. So maybe you run out here, don't push it further. We're not trying to stretch into more range. We're just trying to work to your end range. I feel safe to the floor, so I'm going to go all the way there. And then I'm going to switch my intent with this bottom working arm to now push it downwards into the ground. So now it's going that way instead of upwards like we just were. I'm going to use my support hand to go under, to pry my hand under, and again, I'm going to create some resistance there. Nothing's moving yet, but then as that supporting arm builds in intensity, it starts to win, and we're now engaging what's called eccentric contraction. These eccentric contractions are really a great way to build up the capacity of your connective tissue, especially as that tissue gets pulled into length. So as you finish up your range of motion, you might feel some stretch and effort, like a Pale's contraction. I'm going to pause there, switch intent, so now my wrist is trying to reach down to the floor, and then my support hand is going to help amplify that signal by pushing against and starting to win. Push that arm back into external rotation. Okay? This is a great one to really build some intensity in those rotational tissues. So I encourage you, as you get a feel for this, to really start to find an arm wrestling match with yourself. So that if your supporting hand were to go away, your top hand would just slingshot right back to the floor or to your end range in that internally rotated position. So you really have to be conscious and switch the direction of your effort when you get to that end range. Just a couple more here. Building up some fatigue. If you're feeling that fatigue and you need to take a break, by all means go for it. Like everything else in Kinstretch, this stuff is totally relative to you and your tissue.
just using the tools and changing the intensities and the times for each individual. All right, let that go. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other side. Work some of this eccentric contraction. So I'm going to lay down on my side, make sure my neck is nice and long, my shoulder blade is not scrunching up to my neck, and then feel out that rotation on this other side, just noticing how much is available. And then settle into your internally rotated position. Once you get there, start trying to feel that wrist reach towards the floor. So you're trying to increase your range of motion, but you'll be at an end range. And then use your supporting hand and just create that little extra signal. So nothing moves yet, but you feel those deep rotators in your shoulder come online, and then start to invite that motion. Feeling that your working arm is resisting the whole time, nice and strong, but your top arm is just going to win the day. Okay, once you get to your end range of external rotation, switch the intent of your working arm. So now I'm trying to externally rotate that arm, but I'm going to use my support arm to wind back into internal rotation. Once I can't go any further, again, switch the intent, trying to wind my arm into more internal rotation, turning on those internal rotators, and then using the support arm to really create an intense battle in those tissues. Keep describing this as a battle. I think that's because my memories of arm wrestling involve my brother. And my brother and I, while I love him dearly, had quite the drag-out battles growing up. All types. Computer games, yard fights with, seem to remember, PVC pipes covered in foam that we would smack each other with. Probably not the best idea, but hey, we both made it to adulthood. Couple more here, really trying to drive some intensity deep to that joint. Of course, if anything is painful or feels sketchy, just pause, just skip it. Not worth it. Might be nothing, but it might be something. And you might have just discovered something in your shoulder. Last one, spend whatever else you've got on this eccentric. All right, and then relax. Okay. Now, after that, the last thing that I really want to do and focus on here is just to be conditioning all of that tissue that we might have just opened up. Okay, because think about it. If you started the class with a shoulder capsule that is, let's say, this big, and then we stretched our way into a little bit more range of motion, and then we asked the brain to learn about how to rotate the tissues in that deeper range of motion, the last thing we want to do is just do a full car. So really give the brain the full idea of what's available using this greater range of motion. Now I take a moment to talk about this because sometimes when you go back to a familiar movement like a car, your brain just can go on autopilot. And that's literally the exact opposite of what we want whenever we do a car. We want to be tuning into a new experience. We want to be tuning into that new band of range of motion, okay? So as you do this car, especially on the first couple, try to go slow and feel into any new ranges that you might be able to find, aka feel into any new contraction sensations you might be able to find, okay? To help support you in a nice intense effort here,
I'm going to set up in quadruped, and I encourage you to do the same. You could just as well stay upright or do any other setup you like. But I'm also going to time this set. So we do a full 90 seconds of work. Feel free to go back and forth or to scan over certain zones, but the goal at the end of the 90 seconds is that you are fatigued in those tissues of that shoulder, okay? So go ahead, set up in your best quadruped or variation of quadruped that you'd like, and then cut your right arm across, start to sweep up. When you can't get any higher, start to internally rotate, keeping the arm straight, reaching into that space behind you, and maybe feeling into that same quarter car we worked from sideline. At the pocket, just reverse. Find end range extension at that sticking point. Initiate your external rotation. Keep twisting the arm, externally rotating all the way around, and then keep going here. Breathing, but still working. Feeling that intensity build. Not letting the elbow bend. Not letting your body start to speed the movement up. And not losing sight of trying to reach into those new end ranges of motion. All right, and let it go. Very nice. Let's go ahead and do the same set on the other side. Take a breath. Get into your base position of choice. Brace your body. Check my watch here, and then here we go. Off to the races. Sweeping your arm up, overhead. At that sticking point, start to internally rotate the shoulder. Don't stop internally rotating until you get all the way around. So keep adding twist. When you get to that pocket, pause. Reverse course, go straight behind. When you can't go any further, initiate that external rotation. Don't stop externally rotating until you get all the way back in front of your body. Keep going, team. Can you open up more twist? Can you reach further? Can you spend any extra effort in those deep shoulder tissues? Going slow so you're not skipping any ranges. Nice. Finish up the rep you're on, and then let it go. All right, very nice work. Thanks for joining me for a little training session. And let me know questions on some of these setups, especially that quadruped for internal rotation. As you know, I love new setups, but some of them can feel very weird in your body. Some of them might be the thing that your body needs. So let me know, and I'll see you soon.